Hey there, welcome to day one of a 21-day series on Kubernetes certification, CKA and CKAD. And in this video, we're going to cover everything related to Kubernetes for beginners. We'll look at overview, concepts, architecture, and components of Kubernetes. And we'll also look at Kubernetes installation. We're going to look at both basic, Minikube, mini version of Kubernetes installation, or more in-depth hard way of doing installation of Kubernetes. And we'll also look at Kubernetes installation on managed Kubernetes, which is on cloud, which is AWS and EKS as well. And if you're new here, coming this first time on this channel, I've not looked at, I did a previous day one topic about a 21-day series where we've covered everything that you should be, that I'm going to cover in this 21-day series. So I'll put it link, hyperlink it maybe after this. If you've not watched that, go and watch that. If not, come straight to this video and pay special attention first to this. So let's look at what we are going to cover. As I said just now, we'll look at overview, what is Kubernetes, and we'll give you some links about Kubernetes. We'll also look at the Kubernetes components, what Kubernetes master and worker node, and then we'll also look at the various components or resources that we talk about in Kubernetes, what that means are. And then we'll look at how to install Kubernetes and also share some links. And this is the 21-day series which I was talking about, we covered on day one. And if you're here first time on this channel, looking first time, my name is Atul, been working in IT for almost now close to 2.5 decades, more than 1.5 decade now in cloud, multi-cloud, containers, Kubernetes, and so on. And I've gone from earning less than $100 a month to now earning in excess of £1,000 a day here in the UK as well. So, and I've helped thousands of individuals like you to get certified. So with that, just let's look at the Kubernetes overview and architecture and components. So I'm going to refer to this combination of this document you should have access to, or this guide, or this video, or this portal, which I'll explain you where to find this as well. So first and most important is and if you're coming it first time here, you can register for this Kubernetes cluster by going to this link. I'll put it into the description section as well. So what is Kubernetes? Kubernetes as abbreviated K8S. There's 8 words between, or 8 alphabets between K and S. Kubernetes, it's an open source container orchestration platform. What does container orchestration mean? Something that you can manage, start, stop, control, restart, scale, all those things is all this container orchestration. And all these links you can click here and you can go read more about this container orchestration. These links also difference between Kubernetes as a container orchestration. Kubernetes is not the only container orchestration tool. There are other tools as well that are available, but Kubernetes, of course, is the most infamous that you're going to see in a minute. Now, while these links are opening, just tell you where these are. This is a free community. There you can check it by going to k21academy.com. Free community. If you're not part of, you have to register. It's absolutely free. Once you have registered, you might have to wait for the membership to be approved. We typically approve once we make sure that you're the right person, we'll approve that. And once you have approved, go to the classroom and scroll down. There'll be certifications. If you go under certifications, we have the CK and CKD. This is where we have day 0 and day 1. This is where I'm recording this. This is what you'll see a video here. That's the video which I'm covering here. So there are Kubernetes, what is Kubernetes, and so on. So as I said, there are what exactly is Kubernetes orchestration and management tools? What does Kubernetes means? You can go and read further. I'm going to keep it high level. There are other container orchestration tools like Docker Swarm, Apache Mesos. There is a Azure Kubernetes service, which is a managed Kubernetes with extra things like Azure, AWS, and so on. So have a look at these things as well. So that's number one. Then also typically what they've done is they do help you in deploying, managing a containerized applications, which is nothing but an application built using microservices and so on. Now again, running containers are nothing but, again, as I said, I'm going to keep it high level, but this is where your application run on a containerized platform. I'll not go on deeper here. You can further read deeper into. Also, there is some other options available. So containers, think of it as like a container runtime. You have underlying like Docker, you have a CRIO, you have a containerd, Podman, a lot of container runtimes where the actual application runs. And these management of these containers is Kubernetes. That's what you would say. Now you can read more about containers and there are different options of containers. Also, what is the difference between Kubernetes and Docker Swarm, which is, or Docker Compose, which is from Docker Swarm and so on. Also difference between Docker as a container versus Kubernetes, and then how Kubernetes work with Docker. You can use Kubernetes as an underlying container runtime. When we look at the architecture, that's when you're going to understand So look and read these more of these documents that you see difference between these. There'll be, and we'll be constantly updating these links as well. So go and look at this. Also, I've covered this diagram on day one. So worth looking at day one as well. Now, why you are going to be learning containers or Kubernetes, that's the next topic that we're going to look at now here. So you might be wondering why I should be installing Kubernetes. Again, these are not required for certification, but helpful for you to understand the concepts that we go on deeper. So these is applications built using containers. Now, there are different examples of containers. There's a Docker. There's a full 5-hour course on Docker for beginners. Worth looking at that. That's also available on a blog link. And then go and refer to the YouTube channel as well. That's where you'll be uploaded this full 5 hours course about this. I'm going to close. Let me close these things, and you can refer more on this here. So that's first one is about Docker. So the container Kubernetes orchestration tool for scaling. So you can add more and more containers, or load balancing across different backend containers for your application. Self-healing, which means fixing problem automatically. All you need to do to Kubernetes is you saying that, hey, I need 5 pods. We'll see later a little bit on what a pod means. We'll also look at deployment automation. It can automatically add and remove those deployments and do auto forward rolling. And we'll see some of these things on more advanced topics. So that's about Kubernetes, why you need it. With that, let's look at the next part, which is core components of Kubernetes. Now, this is important. Again, there'll be more related links and documents I'm going to refer, but I'm going to juggle between this link here and also this document, which I've created this document about what these are. So we've just covered overview of Kubernetes. This is now we're going to look at architecture and components. So there are 2 parts in the Kubernetes cluster that you see. One you see left hand side is a control plane. Think of it as also called as master node, or word used interchangeably, control plane or master node. Now this is basically to master and control all your worker node, or also known as data plane. So this is mainly for management point of view, and this is more where your applications run. You can have 1 master node, or you can have 3 master node. You have multiple master node, we call multi-master Kubernetes cluster. Similarly, you can have 1 worker node or multiple worker nodes. Think of node as a virtual machine or a machine on which your multiple containers run. So you have a master node and you have a worker node, and within master node you have a API server, and everything or anything that you interact as an administrator or as a developer to deploy the application, you're going to connect to the API server. So it's a first entry point to the Kubernetes from a management, administration, deployment point of view, and you do it through a RESTful, which is a way of API connection. There is a SOAP and REST. I'm not going to go deeper there, but just to know, it processes the RESTful request. We'll see that when we fire a kubectl or Kubernetes cluster, it's going to hit the API server. Then you have a scheduler, which is another component which you see, and there are more than 1 different type of schedulers. This is basically assign workload, nothing but your applications on to the worker node and assign them resources and so on. What is pod? We'll see that in a minute. Then you have a controller manager. So basically do different type of activities, and so for example, you say that, hey, I want to run these many applications for this much time, and whatever you define, that's what role of controller, and the different type of controllers as we go and see later in subsequent lessons. You'll see that on subsequent days. I've covered in future videos. I'm going to look at a little bit deeper into controller managers. It basically helps to ensure that whatever desired state you expected Kubernetes to do, it will maintain that, and it'll also restart the failed pods. We'll see that in a minute what the pod is and so on. Now etcd, which is a database, which is a key value pair, basically store the cluster state. So you say that, hey, I should have 5 nodes, I should have 5 pods, I should have this application, that application running. All that configuration is stored in etcd, and this is where the very, very important component. Later, I think on day 18 or 19, I said we are going to do a backup and restore of the Kubernetes cluster. That's one of the topics that you will get it in CKA certification. So make sure you know how to do a backup and restore of etcd, which we'll see later part. So these are all makes master node. Then you have a worker node, and this is where actually your application is going to run. And that application running is happening via something called as pod, which we'll see in a minute. But pod is nothing but collection of 1 or more containers that you see. So within worker node, you will have, think of it as a multiple virtual machines, or maybe a physical machine on which your applications run with 1 or more pods or containers we call. Now it has a kubelet, it has a kube proxy, and it has a container runtime. So we saw earlier container runtime earlier on here, There were different container, a different type of container runtime. It can be Docker, it could be Sierra, it could be Containerd, it could be Podman, and a lot of other containers. Go and check that out. So we'll be running this. Now, kube proxy basically is managing the networking, how the request comes, they talk to each other, and so on. So it runs inside or outside the cluster. So let's suppose you have a kube proxy. These nodes talk to each other, or the pods within that talk to each other. And then you have a kubelet that's an agent, and basically it ensures that containers run. It gets kubelet gets the request from the API server to start and stop application service as well. And again, I'm going to keep it high level, 30,000 foot view, enough for you. Now, if you want to know more about Kubernetes components, there's a blog which I mentioned here. Also, we'll refer to this guide, which will have useful about Kubernetes for beginners. There's a complete beginner's guide. There's also a Kubernetes cluster component benefit in working. You can read out this. This is another architecture diagram you have. So you have master node. This is where you see, and then you have a worker node, more than multiple machines, which has running something called as pod. We'll see that as well in a minute. So this is on a high level architecture, which is a master node and a worker node, more than one of master node. It could be more than one or more worker node as well. Now, at the time of recording this is early 2025. The master node is always Linux, but the worker node can be Windows or Linux and so on. You can have a mix and match, but master node is always Linux. If it changes, we'll record and update this as well on as you see. Now, next is about resources. These are the different components or the artifacts that you're going to use, and over the next period of day 2, 3, 4, 5 and up to 21 or 20th days, we're going to cover and going deeper into these concepts. I'm keeping it for the time being only the high level concepts that you see, or high level resources that we call about in Kubernetes cluster. So first thing within Kubernetes resources, you have a pod, which is nothing but a smallest unit in Kubernetes, which is nothing but collection of one or more containers where application runs. Now everything basically are these containers within the multiple containers covered using the same storage, same networking, and they are designed to run as an application. Now, I think you want to know more about pod. There's a blog that I've referred. You can link. Again, I will see Kubernetes pod for beginners. Refer to that. Also, I think the next day, let me see, on day 2, we are going to look at pod and YAML. And I might add a JSON as well in that YAML and JSON, what these are, we'll explain that as well. Then you have a deployment. Basically, deployment controls what kind of a desired state of a pod, which means it should be running, how many of those are running, on which machine are running, and these are also useful for rolling update or rollback applications and as well. So I think if we look at the deployments, we are going to look at more about deployment on, most probably we're going to look at application deployment. We're going to go on day 4. And I think we also have rolling update and all those things on day 6, day 4 and day 6. We're on day 1 today. Here we are listening on this one. So with that, that's about deployment. Again, you want to go read more about deployment. There's a blog and video which I've covered, and I might go deeper into these links that you see about all about deployment. We'll be constantly updating these content that you see. So quite extensive details. Then you have a services, and services are basically that exposes pods for networking. So any application you want, end user needs to connect to that application, or one pod needs to talk to other pod, or other connections, they happen using services. And in services, there are different type of services. As you look at the diagram below, there's a cluster IP, there's a load balancer, there is a node port, there's an ingress, which is another type of traffic that we'll see I'm going to talk about as well. So Kubernetes services, this is the way for networking. And again, read more about these things that you see here on this blog as well. So that's services. And I think for services, we have a detailed day. We are going to cover networking, which is day 5. We're going to go deeper into all these different types and different documentation link that you come across as well. Then you have the config map and secret. This is where to store all the sensitive information related. So maybe any configuration. So let's suppose you have a pod, which is an application talking to the database tier, then connection of user ID and connection details, or of where your target databases are, or any sensitive details like passwords or any critical secrets and so on. Those will be stored in this config map and secret. Again, you want to read more about config map and secrets. We're going to cover, there's a blog written, and then on this, we're going to go, and there's a video should be there on Kubernetes secrets and so on. Now, ingress controllers, this is a layer 7. If you're familiar with networking models, there's a 7 layers, and layer 7, which is a HTTP, HTTPS level, where you manage the services in this controller. I'm going to go deeper into, because this is one of the most, when I was studying Kubernetes certification or learning Kubernetes, I found a lot of confusion about Ingress controller, how it's different with other network services. We'll talk about those with some examples of Ingress controller. Again, we are going to cover that on day, I think it's going to be on networking topic. When we look at the networking, this one we're going to cover, which is going to be most probably day 5. We're going to look at Ingress controllers day 5. Yeah. So, and then final within, and there are more, but I'm just giving you in a high level namespace, which is a logical partitioning, as I said on day 1 as well, multiple environments. Like you can do it test, stage, prod, or you can say application 1, application 2, different level of logical partition of cluster to support multiple environments within Kubernetes. So you can have one dedicated production, you can have a staging, and then you have a multiple dev 1, dev 2. You can break it down, logical containers or partitioning namespace. Again, what is namespace? How do you do that? There are some certification questions will going to come with respect to namespace. So we'll talk about everything about namespaces as well. You'll be learning and going through. So that's about on a high level. These are components that you do. Now next is about how does actually Kubernetes work. So typically you write a manifest file, which means a set of instructions that dictates how the desired state of your cluster will look like, how many applications will run, how they're going to run, all those, how many pods will be there, and so on. And these are written either in YAML, yet another markup language, or in JSON file, which is a Java stored object notation JSON file. We'll show some examples, and by the time maybe in next week, I'm going to write down more about a dedicated blog on YAML and JSON and some examples. So you'll have some more links here. And what are the replicas? And so basically, that will dictate how the application will look like on a Kubernetes cluster. And then we'll apply that Kubernetes manifest file using kubectl or kubectl, they say. Once we install today, the later part I'm going to install, and then we're going to see how to run this kubectl command as well. And then finally, once you tell that, Kubernetes will take care of how it's being run. You don't need to worry about it. You just tell it how should it look like, and it'll do that. With that, that's covered the part 1 of the Kubernetes this day 1, which is about overview, architecture, components, and a very high level things and component that you see on Kubernetes. With that, let's look at the second part of day 1, which is about Kubernetes installation. Now, this is going to be a little bit lengthy but make sure that you pay special attention onto this, because we're going to do it depending on when you start. Every Tuesday and Thursday, I'm doing this series about 2 days. So in order for you to install Kubernetes, first of all, as I said, master node is Linux. Worker node could be Linux or Windows, but typically we're going to do it on Linux. That's supported operating system. When they talk about Linux, it's this. You can have worker node on Windows. We'll cover that on more advanced topics. Then hardware, you need 2 CPUs, and then minimum 2 GB of RAM, which is, I think it's less in my view. Technically, you can run with a Kubernetes cluster with 2 GB, but I think have 8 GB these days. Even laptop have that, and especially 10 GB of disk space. We're going to do slightly bigger. Then you can run any container runtime like Docker, container, DCRIO. So do that. And then when you install, there are 2 different ways to install the Kubernetes cluster. And this is where I'm going to go on these notes now on Kubernetes installation part. This is here, Kubernetes installation. And so first you are installing that Kubernetes cluster. Let me go back on to how to set up a 3-node step-by-step instructions, Kubernetes 30, k2academy.com/this URL Kubernetes 30. This is where you will have everything detailed step-by-step instruction on a 3-node cluster. So you can create those 3 nodes. Easy method will be create on a Microsoft Azure cloud or AWS cloud, 3 machines. Make sure that 3 machines talk to each other, and then we'll install kubectl, Kubeadm, and kubelet, and then install. This is a hard way of doing it, connecting them. That's one method. Or you have another option, which is Minikube, everything in a single node, but you'll not mimic like the way you do in real production environments. But this is a way to practice your Kubernetes cluster on a Minikube, which is a single node cluster. So you can try that out. Commands for installing Minikube is this. Steps might change slightly. So if you're installing and hitting any problem, come here at the bottom of this, and not sure why there should be a link below this thread. There should be a thread. If you go down here, I think I've created a thread, and you can post any questions you have in that thread at the bottom of this thread. Yeah, so you can come here and you post any questions you might come related to when you're installing and configuring. We'll have more detailed steps that you do. So that's one method of doing, which is a Minikube. Second method is then Kubeadm, which is a multi-node, which means you install first master node, and then on that master node you install Kubeadm, kubectl, and kubelet. Then you do worker node, and then you do the same setup, Kubeadm, kubectl, and all the three uh, dependencies, and then you install container runtime as well on that. And then you join these master node with worker node. There is a step-by-step guide and video which I've limited or given here. This 3-node setup step-by-step. We have done this setup, so maybe worth trying it out. Any issues, just let us know. We are doing it on Microsoft Azure cloud because it gives you 30 days, but you can do the same setup on AWS cloud or any cloud as long as these three machines can talk to each other. That's a main important thing. And so on. So practice that. Any doubts, any problems, let us know, or do a Minikube, whatever makes your life easy. So that's Kubeadm method of doing. And then finally, you are joining, initializing joining. So I'll explain you once I go through. If I want to go deeper into, I might have a subsequent video, separate video covering this. This is a high level steps. Now, this is where the most of guys make mistake of. They don't configure the kube config, which is a configuration file, main important file. Again, when you install, you will understand what I'm talking about, but go and install this after this video. You will understand. Any problems, leave below as a comment section below this video, or ask question in the comment section as well. That's another one of. So that's a basically second method about installing Kubernetes, which is in hard way using Kubeadm they call. And then the third, another method is using kind, which is a Kubernetes in a Docker environment. So you can using Docker. I've not used myself this kind, which is Kubernetes in Docker. I think Minikube will be much better. So either use option 1, option 2 I've given you. Other option is you can do Kubernetes on AWS cloud, which is a EKS, install and configure of EKS. I think I have steps there. If not, I'll put it Kubernetes install. I'll share that link. One of these links should be on Kubernetes installation. I'm not sure exactly, but we have a step-by-step guide on how to create a Kubernetes cluster, which you'll be seeing steps to install Kubernetes cluster on AWS, EKS. Similarly on AKS, those steps I'll put it below this video on this video later. So that's you install, and then you verify that by setting up the Kubernetes configuration, and you run some commands, which is kubectl. As I said, I have a separate video about going deeper into this. Now, you can do some additional steps if you want. You can deploy Kubernetes dashboard, which is a graphical user interface. You don't need to do it from a certification point of view. I don't think it's required. If anything changes, I'll let you know in the comment section about this video. Then metric server for monitoring management. Later part, we're going to do more advanced thing, which is auto scaling. That's when we'll install the metric server. That's when we'll need it. For now, you can skip and you can get away with, but later if you want, you can do metric server as well. And then there are some basic commands, make yourself familiar with, which is a kubectl, and which is get nodes will give you, this is the way you can say kubectl and -- help and so on. So you do an install. Now, when you're installing, we see repeat people come inside. We have a program on Kubernetes, hands-on lab project based, where we go deeper into these things. Some of the common problem that we see users hitting are that they typically, the master node can't, or worker node can't talk to master node can't talk to worker node because of firewall issues, either between machine to machine or machine to client and so on. Also kubectl not working because kubeconfig, which is this configuration file that you see here, this configuration file is not properly either sourced or not properly configured. We might have a separate video talking about that. So that's, or there is a ports are not open, or ports doesn't come up because of the dependencies not met, which is like there's a network plugin required, you've not done. So best would be do a Minikube if you really, or do a managed Kubernetes installation as well. So that's from an installation point of view. Let me see if I missed anything else. And again, so we've covered the second part, Kubernetes installation part, how to do a setup 3-node Kubernetes cluster. I might do it on AWS. If your preference is on AWS, do let me know. And we'll create also how to do Kubernetes on Minikube. Now, you want to do Kubernetes installation on managed Kubernetes, you can read out on this particular blog. Also, Kubernetes on AWS cloud, which is EKS, Elastic Kubernetes Service, if you want to go deeper. Similarly, Kubernetes on Azure cloud, AKS, Azure Kubernetes Service. From a certification point of view, they won't ask. This is an additional knowledge that you're going to do and learn about the more job prep ready. For certification point of view, you can skip completely AKS or EKS or Minikube and so on. And then you have a Google Kubernetes engine, Kubernetes on Google Cloud, and similarly Kubernetes on Oracle Cloud, which is Oracle Kubernetes engine OKE as well. Now, with that, we have to come On the next part of the topic, one second, I think I made a mistake. One second. Yeah. So next part is about some basic knowledge to see and test whether you've learned or not. Don't look at it, don't read the answers. That will be the good point, not to read the answers, and then we'll cover whether you've answered or not. If pause this recording, go back and come back again. From a certification is not a multiple choice question. Just want to repeat one more time. In certification, you don't get a multiple choice question. In certification, you get actually by doing and implementing. I'll show you an examples. But here, just to test your knowledge, which component in Kubernetes act as a front end? We saw that in Kubernetes architecture. If you look at on a front end, every request is going to come on hit on everything that is coming. This is coming on this Kube API. So you as an administrator, you as someone who's deploying the application, you'll be first always hitting Kube API server. So when kubectl fire a command, they come and hit to this server. So the answer will be the API server that you see, API server. Next is what is the purpose of etcd? Etcd, which is this is a database to store the state or the configuration of the entire Kubernetes cluster. So it's a key value, not for debugging, not for health, not for scaling pod. It's basically storing the cluster state. So answer C is right on this. Now next is about which component is responsible for scheduling the pods. Probably is a name of scheduler. It's, I think, self-explanatory, so it's don't need to do it. Next is which command is used to check the version of kubectl installed. So kubectl itself has a version. So you have a Kubernetes version, you have a kubectl version. Each component has its own version. Even in fact, etcd has a version as well. So how do you find out the kubectl version? You'll be using -- always. So option B, kubectl -- version. So -- version. Next is which tool can be used to create a local Kubernetes cluster for practice? As I've said just now, Minikube, simple. So it's option number B, which is Minikube. Now Docker Compose is again more advanced, something similar to Kubernetes. You have a Minikube, of course, do. Ansible is a configuration management, and Terraform is a infrastructure provisioning tool as well. Next is about, so these are the main. Now from a Kubernetes actual certification sample exam question point of view, they might ask you to say, hey, join, you already are given a Kubernetes cluster and you're given a node and say, hey, join this node to the Kubernetes cluster, which is already running. So to find out, there's a command to find out, a join command. So let's suppose you don't have any join command right now. So you can run a command on an API server. As long as you have access to the API server, the master node, you can go and run the actual command on API server to find out the command to join, and then run that join command on the worker node. As long as there's a network connectivity with master node, you should be able to do that. That's another point. Next is about ensure that control plane is running and operational after restart. So they might restart, crash it, and say it's up and running. Or they might also ask you and say, hey, install. Typically, I've not seen installation asking you to install. Extending might be there. So these are things that you can expect. So with that, that's pretty much on day 1 of this. On day 2, we are going to look at pods. YAML, I might add, if you see updated, I might add JSON. I'll speak to my team. If not, we'll have a separate topic about YAML and JSON. What is a pod? How do you create them? There'll be some examples. So make sure you have Kubernetes cluster ready, and we're going to see some actual pod running and some example, what the pod is, how do you do, and some more additional things. Look at the link, go through. Just want to recap on, say, you can go to this free community, k2nacademy.com/free community. Go to that free class which I mentioned. Also go and attend this URL, k2nacademy.com/CKAD 21 days. On that free community which I mentioned, come to this point under classroom, come to the classroom, and then under classroom, you go and scroll down, look at certifications, and under certifications, go and look at day 1 here. Any questions you have related to this thread or issues, anything that you need, just put it into this thread, or leave a question below this video. Now, don't forget to share with your friends and colleagues. We are learning, and by end of this, you should be able to do a certification, prepare certification. If you need our help in terms of reaching out to my team, you need a more personalized support in order to not only get certified and get a job, you can reach out to us by k2nacademy.com/book call so that they can connect and see if we can help you. There'll be a 12-13 minute video. Watch that video and then click on book a free consultation call to see if we can help you or not. With that, Atul from team K2 Academy. I'll probably see you on day 2 talking about pods, YAML, JSON, and everything that you need to kick off your first pod on a Kubernetes cluster. Till then, take care, and I'll see you on day 2. If you have any other question, any other help you need, or any other track like this you need, just let me know, and I'll see you tomorrow. Take care and bye for now.